So I drink till the night becomes another day, and the day's just another little thing in our way. There's something about the way you beat me down that I'll never learn. You're the pint of no return, the pain in my chest, the stain on your dress, the glass in my eye. But this life is a joke and death is the punch. I
Mothers of Mayhem!
Beep, beep, kids. Welcome to Mothers of Mayhem, an extreme horror podcast. This is your weird book mom, Marian, bringing you another very special episode of the show today. This is session 3 of my Hidden Voices of Horror discussion panel series. And since a discussion panel usually involves more than one person, you might be confused by the fact that I am alone right now. Today's episode focuses on the mental health community and our representation within the horror genre. We will also be breaking down the ways horror is commonly used for therapeutic trauma processing, cathartic release, and coping. I have 5 remarkable authors on deck waiting to jump into this Zoom room and chat it up with me, but there are some things that I want to talk to you all about first. So I am a registered nurse. Mental health is my practice specialty. I am ANCC board certified in psychiatry. I have worked in the mental health field for 14 years, inpatient, emergency room, intensive outpatient programming, as well as state hospital, step down, adult residential. And now I am a trainer of safety escalation and behavioral crisis management for healthcare providers. Not only am I a psychiatric professional, but I have struggled with my own mental health challenges throughout my life. And I have been diagnosed with major depressive disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, and post-traumatic stress disorder. There was also a time in my early adulthood when I struggled with various personality disorder symptoms. I intensely invested myself in dialectical behavioral therapy for quite a few years. And I am happy to say I was able to resolve most of those issues and achieve greater mindfulness regarding my emotional regulation, interpersonal relationship dynamics, self-awareness, all those wonderful things. What I'm about to say might be considered a hot take, but I believe it to be the absolute truth. So anyone who tells you they have never struggled with mental health issues is totally full of it. Mental health exists on a continuum, my friends, much like our physical medical health does. So let me show you a picture here. Give me 1 second. So here we have this beautiful picture that I made for you. For those of you who are listening and not watching on YouTube, the image I have up on the screen is a long horizontal line with 2 arrows, one on each end. The arrows are pointing in opposite directions. The far right arrow is labeled stability. Stability refers to when we are capable of good emotional regulation and we can handle stressors and triggers without them overly disrupting our ability to function. On the far left side here, we have severe instability. Severe instability refers to a time in our lives when mental health concerns have caused us significant disruption to our ability to function and to cope. Now, that being said, every person on this planet has a point on this continuum that we consider to be their baseline. So let's look at the baseline. Your baseline is the way you tend to experience and handle life on an average day. Your baseline point on this continuum will change over the duration of your life, depending on how things evolve for you. But we tend to hover around certain baseline points for significant periods of time. So someone like myself, who has been lucky enough to have relative success managing their mental health challenges, may perceive themselves as having a baseline point closer to the right end of this continuum. So I can handle my triggers and my stressors relatively well, all things considered. Now, someone who struggles with a chronic treatment resistant mental health diagnosis, or who has not yet identified that they need help, may actually have a baseline that exists farther down towards the left side of the continuum. Regardless of where our baseline is at any given time, life stressors, trauma, victories, achievements, all of these things, celebrations, losses, they cause us to slide up and down the continuum on an almost constant basis. And then when life settles again, we return to baseline. So here's the big takeaway. Even though you may never experience a mental illness significant enough to meet diagnostic criteria, there will always be times in your life where you will experience mental health challenges. It is unavoidable. It is a natural part of our human existence. So if it ever gets to a point where you feel your mental health challenge has negatively impacted your ability to function or cope with daily life, I strongly encourage you to reach out for help. There is no shame in it whatsoever. Never allow yourself to suffer needlessly. You may think in the moment that there is no hope, but I am here to tell you that all things are temporary and you are capable of modifying your ability to manage these difficult things. You know, according to studies completed in 2020 by NAMI, the National Alliance for Mental Illness, 1 in 5 US adults experience mental illness each year. 1 in 20 US adults will experience serious mental illness each year. 1 in 6 of American children between the ages of 6 to 17 experience a mental health disorder. 50% of all lifetime mental illness begins by the age of 14, and 75% of us have experienced mental illness by the age of 24. Suicide is the second leading cause of death among people aged 10 to 34, and 82% of adults admitted to inpatient mental health units have reported experiencing significant trauma. Sadly, in my experience, that number is probably inaccurately low due to the fact that many people will avoid admitting to having experienced trauma. And this is because of centuries old mental health stigmas. Mental health stigma is still a very real problem. And we will be discussing stigma and how it is used as a horror trope in our discussion today. And before I bring in the rest of the panel, I want to provide you with a bit of a heads up. Mental health discussions can be hard. It takes a lot of courage to come on a podcast and speak your personal truth. And because of the nature of this conversation, there may be some trauma disclosure on behalf of my guests. There may also be conversations about suicide, self-harm, substance abuse, and other forms of maladaptive coping or illness manifestations. So please protect your psyche and skip this episode if you believe it might be too much for you. You can always come back to us when you feel like you're ready. Also, because of the depth of information that we have to discuss regarding this topic, this episode could potentially be quite long. So I'm just warning you now. As always, I will be keeping it as light and lively as possible. But this stuff has a natural heaviness to it. You know, everyone on the panel today, including myself, is diagnosed with one or more mental illnesses as they are defined by the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Illnesses, which you may also have heard reference to as the DSM-5. Any irreverent humor you hear coming out of us today is primarily our way of coping with our lives as they are and as they have been. Sometimes you just gotta laugh about shit. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. Let's do it. All right. Okay, my darlings. I have the absolute pleasure of sharing space today with 5 incredible indie horror authors and extraordinary mental health advocates. We have Lucas Milliron, ALLISHA MCADOO, Gerhard G. Oh, ALLISHA, I'm so sorry. All this time I've been saying it wrong in my head.
Everybody does.
My last name is Echeverria. You should hear the amazing attempts that we get on that one. So, mad empathy. ALLISHA MCADOO. I did it right. Gerhard Jason Geik.
Gerhard.
Yeah! I'm fucking up everybody's names. Gerhard Jason Geik. You and I are like super good friends, and all this time you never told me. Yeah, you never told. You were like, Marian.
It's just,
You
unless
did
it's
it.
like this, it's just too hard. It's just too hard.
Y'all are killing me here. Jesus. All right. Lucas Milliron, ALLISHA MCADOO, Gerhard Jason Geik.
Still Gerhard.
Hey, you got my last name right.
You stop it. You are whoever I say you are at this point. The beautiful Natasha Sinclair, and Lord bless her, her camera is giving her fits right now, so she's doing.
Hi.
She's here. And R.E. Shambrook. Thank you so much for doing this with me today, my friends. I did record an intro to this episode before we all got together here. I shared with the audience my own diagnoses of major depressive disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, and PTSD. So I would love to take a minute now for you all to briefly introduce yourselves as well. If you could give a little wave for our YouTube fans when I call you out, that would be awesome. While Zoom shows us right now all of our names, it does not process over with the YouTube video. So just wave so they have an idea of who you are. Tell us a little about yourself and your work within the horror industry. And if you feel comfortable sharing it, it would be very helpful for us to know your mental health diagnoses as well. So, Lucas Milliron, you want to kick this thing off for us?
Sure. My name is Lucas Milliron. Most people are aware of me from Cocksucker, my aptly named Florida Man horror. That's what I'm most known for. I also have several other books, including Lost Words in a Dream, my cosmic horror story, Timmy Less, A Story of Repressed Memories, and several others. Godless knows me very well for Skin Deep.
Yes.
Now, as far as my diagnoses, I am a dyslexic. I am someone who suffers both depression, anxiety, PTSD through childhood trauma, and lots of repressed memories. For me, it's really hard to recall some of my childhood from the age of 12 and younger, just due to a lot of abuse through my biological father and some other family funsies.
Yeah. Gotta love those adverse childhood events, don't we? Super fun. Well, thank you, friends. ALLISHA, my beautiful, beautiful ALLISHA MCADOO. Tell us about yourself, darling.
Well, I have 24 paperbacks available on Amazon, and I've got like 12 on Godless. I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia. And the more, the less I can move, the more depressed and anxiety I get. And they call it admissible depression. So,
Yeah.
but that's me. And
Yeah.
then I've got a little bit of probably some PTSD from some pretty shitty situations from my childhood and whatnot.
Well, thank you so much, friend. Gerhard. I'm gonna keep saying your name wrong just to mess with you.
Correction, she doesn't remember how to say it.
Go ahead, friend. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I'll just keep remembering that you're doing it because you don't care.
No! Sure, Jan.
Just think like Care Bear. Like that, like Care Bear and then Gerhard.
Oh yeah, I can do that.
Yes, it's easy.
Kind of. Well, tell us about yourself, my friend.
Okay. So I'm author and editor. I've edited way more than I've written. I've edited lots of erotica and edited and written that as well. And I've been editing and writing full-time for about 4 years. I've have type 1 bipolar and PTSD from childhood stuff. And I had a major episode, manic episode, hypermanic episode in 2017. And before that, I was working in social work. So I worked in a group home for adults with developmental disabilities. I worked in groups homes with youth with developmental disabilities and alcohol and drug abuse. I worked in shelter, and then I had a manic attack that lasted 5 weeks. And after that, I wasn't able to go back to work in that field anymore.
Yeah.
So then I moved on to this.
Yeah. It's very, very challenging when you're used to working on one side of the desk and you end up on the other, which is a very fascinating experience to have. And in the long run, I think makes you a much more empathetic and compassionate healthcare provider in the long run. Thank you, friend, for sharing all of that with us. Natasha, tell us about yourself, gorgeous.
So I'm an independent writer and a freelance editor. So I edit under Word Refinery, and I independently publish and have got lots of short stories and a plethora of anthologies. Only really over the last 2 years that's happened. But yeah, that's been lots of fun. I was diagnosed with major depressive disorder when about 20 years ago now. Yeah, I was quite like between 18 and 20. Although I had suffered from depression my whole childhood, as long as I can remember. But I wasn't able to deal with it until I was able to deal with it on my own because, well, you know how these things go with families and stuff.
Yeah.
And I've also gone through PND and PTSD as well because of traumatic. My kids were in neonatal intensive care when they were born and stuff like that. So,
oh, yes.
That brought a lot of stuff with that too.
Absolutely. You know, one of the most fascinating things about trauma is how subjective it is, and how differently we all experience certain things. So it's just hearing everybody's stories and background. It just really highlights how different we all are, and yet how much these shared experiences allow us to relate to one another. So thank you, friend. R.E. Shambrook. Hello, my dude.
Hello.
Tell us about yourself.
I have one book on Godless. It's a collection of 4 stories. It's short, sweet, not so sweet, but that's it. I have a lot in the works. I started a long time ago and just never followed through with it. More about that later. So I have anxiety and depression. My psychiatrist is trying to figure out if I'm bipolar or not. I have OCD issues and PTSD from a wonderful stepdad and a first marriage.
It happens.
Yep.
I've had 2 failed marriages, so I understand.
Well, I've had 2, but the first one was bad.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, one of the things I do, I've become very, very interested in trauma and how it rewires our brains and the long-term challenges that it creates throughout life. And it really all comes down to that thing that we call ACEs, which is those adverse childhood events. And then it's like a domino effect. After that, like one thing leads to another. And like one event makes you so much more likely to experience so many more events. It's almost bizarre to me how much more likely we are to experience more traumas after experiencing a single event. So it's fascinating. And look at us all. We're all depressed. Welcome to the Sad Bitch Club, guys.
It's because I thought Christina was going to be here.
You'd probably be better off with Christina at this point. I myself am just mildly hypomanic. So like all the time, that's my baseline. This is it.
Yeah.
Yay! Cymbalta. Love it. So guys, what I am most interested in knowing first is what was your first experience with horror fiction? Most interesting to me is how old you are and what it was. And then what about it at that point in time kind of sucked you into the genre? I'm not going to call on you like we're in a classroom. So if anybody, you can all just go whenever. Moderate yourselves. So tell me about it. First horror fiction experience. How old were you and what about it really drew you in?
I'll go first.
Yeah.
So for me, my first favorite horror movie was Creature from the Black Lagoon.
A classic.
I was around 5 years old, and the only reason I know that is because I continued to be my favorite all the way into adulthood. I mean, my parents raised us on the black and white horror first, because they're like, oh, look, there's the zipper. So it's not that scary because you can see the zipper.
It's obviously not real.
Oh, absolutely. And then because my dad read the Bible backwards and forwards, every Easter, as a family tradition for Easter, we always watch scary movies. So my favorite Easter movie to this day is Army of Darkness. Just, I mean, come on. It's about as gory as The Passion of the Christ.
It is.
With 100% more Bruce Campbell.
Hell yeah.
And it's, I mean, horror's always been it for me. It started with Creature from the Black Lagoon. And then as a kid, I really fell in love with, what was it? Monster Squad. That was a big one growing up.
Yeah. That's
I mean,
still a movie that I recommend to parents who are like, my kid's showing a sign that they're interested in like horror and scary stuff. What's the best movie to start them with? And I always Monster Squad, because it's so good.
Well, and it's a weird movie because it's not quite young adult. It's not quite adult. So it's in that weird middle ground. because
Yes.
it's just borderline scary enough. So, and that's what I love about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But
Oh.
it started young.
Oh, yeah. I was 8 years old when I first saw Night of the Living Dead. And
Mhm.
before all that, I had been afraid of everything. Everything. I remember my dad rented Indiana Jones, The Temple of Doom, and the scene where the thuggy priest takes the guy's heart out. I literally started screaming, got up and ran out of the room and like went and hid in a closet. Like I
Mhm.
was an overly sensitive kid. And then I saw Night of the Living Dead and something inside of my head just like maybe broke. And then when I was 9, Exorcist 3 came out and the commercials made me think I was possessed by the devil. But that's another story.
Well, because for me, it wasn't even just movies, it was reading. Because my parents were very selective as the movies we could watch growing up. No sex, all the violence we wanted, but no sex. I mean, the tits,
Isn't that
yes.
interesting?
Nudity was okay, but sex, not so much.
I wasn't
So-
allowed to watch The Simpsons, but my dad rented Amityville Horror for us.
That's
And he-
weird.
That's amazing.
And he's an Episcopal priest. Like, what the fuck?
When I was a kid, I wasn't allowed to watch or read anything.
Really? So, well, that leads me into this question then. Like, how did you get into horror fiction? What was your first experience? How old were you?
Well, I was living at my dad's I lived there for about 3 months. And I read Pet Cemetery.
Pet
So that was-
Cemetery.
That was my first horror. And like that, I've read that like a dozen times. And like that was just like, it blew me away. And it wasn't just like the content, like the story, but it was the language.
How old were you again?
12 probably.
12.
Maybe 11 or 12. I know, I was probably 11.
Pet Cemetery is still one of those books that many adults will put on their list as like top
DNF.
5 scariest books that they ever read. Either that or they just didn't finish it. It's like, what
Yeah.
are the other? Because it's
I don't
so
think
heavy
that-
for people.
I don't think that as a kid, another child dying affects you as much as it does like
True.
as an adult or a parent.
Yes, true. Totally different perspective. Yeah.
I was the same age when I discovered The Green Mile.
Oh,
It was The Green Mile and The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon. So I'm right there with you with Stephen King.
I had been reading already though, John Wyndham and Ray Bradbury. Like I love Ray Bradbury, and he was,
Oh yeah.
I guess maybe my first introduction to horror, because his endings are pretty
Dark.
dark.
Oh, yeah.
Something Wicked This Way Comes. That's an amazing book.
Oh, yeah.
And I hadn't read anything like that, but I'd read like a lot of his short stories. And like I wasn't allowed to watch like this Inspector Gadget or the Smurfs,
The Claw. I
right?
fucking
Like
hated the Smurfs. man.
Dr. Claw from Inspector Gadget.
Yes.
I couldn't watch that, right?
Yes.
But there were some shows that got slid under the carpet because my mom just didn't know what they were.
Mhm.
And so like my favorite show was the Ray Bradbury Theater.
Yeah, man.
And if she ever sat down and watched an episode, I would have never been able to watch it.
My sister and I used to watch Twilight Zone and Dark Shadows on the Sci-Fi Channel all summer.
Yeah, we only had 3 channels, and we had the rabbit ears, and you'd have to like
Yeah.
play with them and everything. So we didn't get that.
Well, that's a great start. That's a great place to start with a love for horror. What about you other guys? How did you fall into the horror net?
I was pretty much the same in terms of horror movies when I was a kid. Like, My parents kind of tried to shield us from everything, but I used to stay with my gran a lot, and we just sat and had horror movie Saturday night. So it was like Nightmare on Elm Street, Poltergeist, Omen, loads of religious horror.
Yes.
Lots of religious horror, which was quite fun when you're going to Catholic school. And
Me too. I
no
also went
wonder
to
we have
Catholic school,
issues.
and I also had a morbid grandma.
They're the best.
Yes, I think that's where I genetically got my love of it too. Go on, go on. I'm living for this.
Yeah, so that's what started it in terms of movies, and then obviously literature wise, it would have just been reaching for the horror books when you had the book club coming to school and you could buy a book.
Oh,
And it would always be ghost stories and goosebumps and stuff like that first, but I went heavier quite quickly.
Who all here had a childhood obsession with Alvin Schwartz and the scary stories to tell in the dark? Yeah, I was gonna raise those damn hands. I know y'all read these books.
I still haven't read them. It's on my list, like totally.
Oh
But I
my
wish I would
God.
have. I wish I would have read them as a kid because I've heard like so much.
You could
Oh.
read them now as an adult and you will still love them. You
No,
will
I know.
still love them.
They're still on my list.
Oh,
But my
they're
list is so big.
good. Oh, don't tell me about it.
My problem was I was already reading the books of blood.
Ah!
Everyone was reading Goosebumps, and I was reading Clive Barker.
Excellent.
Lucas was a spicy 9-year-old.
Like I said, my parents filtered movies, but they were just happy I was reading.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's like one day I'm reading Bunny Cula, and then the next day, ooh, what's Damnation Game?
Yeah. I fucking hated that damn rabbit. I hated that book so much. I don't know why. I was like, this sucks. Sorry to people who love Bunnicula, but
I just love the steak.
Oh my
They
God.
beat a rabbit with a piece of meat. Just
I freaking hated it. ALLISHA, Ari.
ALLISHA.
Oh my God. It's because all of these months in my mind, that's how I've been saying it. I'm just going to be like, MCADOO, what's up?
Right.
Tell me
Let's
about it, guys.
I started writing when I was about 4 or 5. It was a school assignment, and the teacher flunked me and said it was too dark and I needed to rewrite it. So I rewrote it, but I kept what I originally had written, and I've just been like ever since. Like my favorite books were the John Saul books, and my favorite movie was the Beetlejuice. So
Yes.
Beetlejuice and everything, I just stick with the horror. Now, this last year, I branched off to children's, young adult comedy. I found that I can do both, but I have to have something horror in the right background because I can't just write the young adult.
It's a piece of your soul.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. Beetlejuice was a movie my sister and we could probably do every single line. We watched it so many times. We loved that movie. Loved it.
I've pretty much bought like it about 6 times now because I've either lost copies or I finally broke down and bought it on digital, so I don't have to worry about it anymore.
So you don't keep watching every copy to death. Totally understand. Ari, tell us about how you got into horror.
I had to have been about 2nd grade. Don't know how old I was in 2nd grade. It was 2nd grade. Me and my best friend would go to the library in school, and they had these orange back books, and they were all the classic black and white universal horror. And so he would get one and I would get one, and we would swap them. And so we could read all of them, and there wasn't much reading. It was more picture books, but it started that but I could not take them home. My my dad, stepdad, whatever, he was a Bible thumper. I was not allowed to. Yeah, no. I was in second grade when Beetlejuice came out, and I was not allowed to watch it. It was too gory.
Yeah, you and I must be around the same age
Yeah.
then, because I think I was
never would have
around
been
8
allowed
years
to watch
old.
Beetlejuice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't get to see that one probably till I was like 12 or 13, I think was the first time that
I
we
wasn't
saw
even
that
allowed
one.
to see Back to the Future.
Wow. Isn't it so funny that so many of the parents here desperately tried to keep you away from those things they were afraid would corrupt your mind, and yet you found them anyway because you were just drawn to them. We love it. It's just part of who we are. Horror is
But,
definitely not for
But you know
everybody.
what? One thing it sounds like is that there's also a shared thing that they try to protect our eyes and our ears, but not like maybe our physical bodies, maybe our.
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Like there's fucked up priorities.
Yeah. It's very morality focused, isn't it?
Yeah.
Very focused on the morality, but you're right about the protection of other aspects. When it comes to horror, kind of jumping off of that, since we are talking about how, childhood may have been far more dangerous than, would be expected. Do you feel that horror has provided you an outlet for therapeutic catharsis or trauma processing? And in what ways do you find that to be true?
I mean, I do. I write as therapy, and whatever I've gone through or whatever I'm feeling or whatever demon I want to put to rest, I create a character and I play it out to that character, and that's how I'm able to cope.
Would you
Yeah.
say that most of your books are very personal experiences in that way?
Oh yes, there's a piece of my soul in each story.
Now I love that you take fairy tale stories, like you did the whole Rumpelstiltskin series.
Oh yeah,
Now I'm
that was my
interested.
favorite.
I'm interested in knowing, ALLISHA, were you a big fan of Grimm fairy tales when you were growing up, and basically of like fairy tales in general? Did you find them to be an emotional outlet as a child?
Not really, no. I actually didn't even read the Grimm fairy tales until I was in college. But I mean, I had liked The Little Mermaid growing up. That was like my favorite of all times.
Yes.
And I read a book. I can't remember who it was by or the title, but they had their own take on a fairy tale, and I just thought that was cool as shit. So I was like, I can do that. And I've always liked the story of Rumpelstiltskin because it is just very dark, regardless of which version it is. I'm working on a new dark fairy tale, The Beauty and the Beast.
I loved Beauty and the Beast growing up. My sister and I, that was a VHS tape that we did play to death. It literally fell apart because we watched it so many times. And my mom was a big fan of the live action TV show with Ron Perlman. So I remember seeing that too. And it was very like soap opera-y. What about you other guys? What have you found horror to be a way of kind of processing through stuff?
I'm a very cathartic writer. Every story that I have ever written has at least one piece of truth in my life. I mean, the first book I ever wrote was Tim E. Less. And it wasn't the first book I released because it went through several edits because of the structure of the book is nonlinear. So it took me about 3 extra years of editing before the book actually came out.
Wow.
But the second book I ended up releasing, The Chattering, was about repressed memories. Again, something that I have a lot of experience with growing up. And there's a scene in the story Becoming where Cody is standing in the shower and he's contemplating suicide. That was verbatim taken from a short that I had written when I was around middle school age. I don't remember what age I was.
Wow.
I was heavily bullied as a kid because I was, in the school I was at was called Barton Elementary, and it's in a very poor area of Lake Worth. I mean, I grew up in the ABC streets. Disclosure, my mom's Mexican. My biological father is very Caucasian. So I mostly grew up with my mom. You know, she was a migrant worker, and we grew up in very poor areas.
Yeah.
And I was very picked on because I was the only kid who listened to heavy metal. I was the only kid who liked rock and roll. I was the
Oh
only
my
kid who liked
God.
horror stories. And
You were the
as a-
weird goth kid.
I wouldn't even say goth because I didn't know what that was at the time. I was too busy listening to Metallica and Slayer. So I didn't have anyone that I could call a friend.
Yeah.
And there was a point where I contemplated, well, what would suicide be like? And I wrote it. And I just didn't like the ending. And because I didn't like the ending, that's pretty much why I'm still here. And that ended
Wow.
up in Becoming. So, I mean, even Cocksucker has things that are real life happened to me. And some of it's trauma, some of it's funny, but it's how I process. I mean, Skin Deep it's literally a story about my worst fear. And my worst fear is becoming my dad, becoming my biological father.
Yeah.
And anyone who has read that story knows that that's basically, that's what happens. And I literally took a lot of my own personal traumas, a lot of the actual abuse that happened to me is in that story. And I don't want to say which is real and which is fiction because I still want people to enjoy that book and that story.
Yeah.
But not everything you read in my stuff is totally fiction. And it's how I deal with things. So I am very, very much a cathartic writer.
What about you other guys?
My writing is like exactly the same as what you're talking about, Lucas. Like it's a mixed mash of fiction and nonfiction, and it's saved my life like more times than I count for the last 25 years at least. Just writing like poetry and stuff like that. Like all of my books, the characters are me in some way or another. And I was just talking about this with Marian. My one phobia, cynophobia, is about a dog that gets, well, I'm not going to give out.
Unalived.
Unalived. It's about animal abuse, essentially. And my dad abused animals. And this is gone through a few drafts since I brought it to this form. It addresses like my fears of following and becoming like him, and it addresses some of my fantasies that I've had, revenge fantasies, and it's given me a lot of closure, and it brought a lot of healing. And I used to be like terrified of dogs. I used to have panic attacks around them because of what I've seen and what I've experienced with my dad and dogs. And writing about this has been part of a process that has ended up with me having a dog and building a relationship with the dog. And
Yeah. I hope it's okay for me to mention this. And if not, I'll take care of it in post. But Gerhard actually gave me an opportunity to read work that he created during a manic phase. And yeah, and it was one of the most interesting things I have ever read, especially from the perspective of someone who has worked as a mental health professional. It was just so fascinating to see the glorious creativity and talent that comes through, and the brilliant thinking and the just amazing thought processes. And yet they're all clouded over by grandiose delusion or paranoia, and it's just absolutely beautiful and fascinating. I wish he would publish it. Because I think a lot of people it would really resonate with people. Bipolar is far more prevalent than I think people understand. There are a lot of people who live with bipolar every day, and you might know a lot of people who are diagnosed bipolar and you wouldn't know it because they do what they need to do to take care of themselves and maintain stability. But I just thought it was one of the best things I've ever read simply because of its brutal honesty, but also the beauty that was in it. So yeah, go ahead.
It's hard to get into.
It is.
It's hard to get into. And like I get into a frame of mind where I'm ready to do it, and I'll get like a little tiny chunk out of it. And then it's just like a door closes and it's hard to get into it.
Well, I'm sure, because it also was a highly stressful time in your life. Like you want to honor the experience, but at the same time, you don't want to relive the experience. And when you're working on a narrative, it's hard not to put yourself back in that place. So that also is incredibly understandable. It would be I think one of the most challenging things you would ever have to do is actually formalize that and put it out there to the world.
I think that one of the hardest things is that I've read a fair amount of stuff from other people who are bipolar, and they're writing about their attacks. It's not real because they've lost they're no longer delusional.
Yeah. There's a lack of, it misses that feeling of genuine.
I can remember it a certain way, and it's different from what I've written down, and it's written from what other people say.
Yeah.
So you can't say this is what you were thinking in a situation anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. Natasha, RE.
Yes, hi.
Hi. So what is your relationship with horror in this way? Have you found it to be an outlet for therapeutic processing?
Yes, absolutely. I think I have a bit of a mixture of both, where you put little snippets and pieces of yourself that you want to exercise, I suppose, through fiction or through a character, a situation that's happened, and you'll play it out and fictionalize it. That can be very cathartic. On the other side, you can create something that's the total opposite of the dark place you're at and take it to another dark place.
Absolutely
and just
true.
give yourself absolute escapism. And
Yeah.
I think that's what horror is for a lot of people as well. It's escapism from their own darkness.
Absolutely.
But yeah,
Absolutely.
but I've done that as well. Like one of the books I published a couple of years ago was a trio of short stories, and they were all suicide stories. They were called, it was just A Life of Suicide, and I took one character and they died by suicide at 3 different times within a life. Sounds a bit strange to do.
That's
But
amazing.
a lot of myself went into that. That was very cathartic and very therapeutic because it was thought processes that I had gone through myself. And to write through that, it was a good journey. It was a very therapeutic journey. And I debated about publishing it. But in the end, I did, because the feedback of others that I allowed to read it was that they also found it quite cathartic to read. And I think that's a part of mental health that's very much mental health that's very much glossed over when someone is suicidal.
Oh my God, yes.
People, if someone dies by suicide, people focus on the survivors around that. And I'm not saying, of course, that's extremely traumatic for anyone close to that person around it. But I think sometimes they forget about that the person that actually went through that psychological change and that process of, nope, this is it, it's over. And how much it actually takes to get to that point.
Oh my God, yes. Oh my God, absolutely. Whenever I have worked with family who has been left behind, one of the things that we try to focus on is, they didn't do this to hurt you. This was not personal. You have to think, and a lot of people will go to the, oh, well, they just gave up, or some people will like lean into the only cowardly people do this. Do you imagine how much courage it actually takes?
Yeah.
To walk into that place, to feel that hopeless and that helpless, the amount of pain that someone feels, and how isolated they must feel. So there's an intensity of emotion there that I think people try to avoid because it's very uncomfortable. It's very uncomfortable to consider. The other thing that I always tell people, especially now when I'm like teaching de-escalation and safe crisis management, that kind of thing, you can't tell me that everybody in this world has not had at least that one time experience where they were like, you know what, I just wish I wouldn't wake up tomorrow. It is a universal experience, whether you have a mental health diagnosis or not. You can't tell me that there haven't been at least a couple times in your life where you were like, God damn it, I wish this was just over. Or why am I even fucking here? And anybody who tells you they've never had those thoughts, they're full of shit. Maybe that's a hot take on my part, but I don't know. I'm pretty sure I'm on the money. Real quick, and then I'm gonna bother Ari. But Natasha, what did you say that collection is called again? A Life of Suicide?
A Life of Suicides, and it's just a trio of short stories. Yeah.
Is it available through Amazon?
It is on Amazon. It
All
is.
right.
It was published I think that was 2 or 3 years ago now I published that.
I am very interested in that, so I am putting that on my list. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
R.A.
Hold on, I'm writing that down.
Yeah. I do that. Every episode, I'm like constantly taking notes. I'm like, I need to read this, and I need to put this on my TBR, and now I have to find this. Like I'm ever going to have a chance to read everything.
Audiobooks don't help either.
I know.
Thought getting into audiobooks, I'll be able to read extra while I'm doing all this other stuff. But no, the TBR grows way faster than that too.
Yeah.
Even if you speed it up, oh, it's no good.
I know. Ari, what is your relationship with horror as far as therapeutic processing and all that good stuff goes?
Technically, I started writing in high school, and that was mostly poetry, a few short stories. But I was also that kid that was bullied. My dad was in the Air Force. We went to a new school every year. And so I never learned to make friends because I wasn't going to keep them. So I always was just the kid by myself. So I always got picked on. So I was also really into death metal. So I started writing poetry or lyrics, and I was killing off my classmates.
Hey, better you do it on paper than in real life.
Yeah, exactly. And this is pre-Columbine, you know. I mean, this wasn't a thing yet as much as it is now. But yeah, most of that poetry was or song lyrics were trying to get rid of all the people that bullied me. And then I'd stopped writing for a while. And then when me and my first wife got together, that was a horrible experience. So in a story that'll be coming out sometime, there's a lot of that in there where it's our relationship.
Yeah.
You know, it was a way to get it out and get over it before it was even over.
Yeah. Do you all feel like it's almost like a form of creative writing blended with journaling at times? Finding a way, and I think somebody had mentioned it was like finding a way to take these experiences and kind of put them in a safe space where you can kind of set them aside and step back and look at them and process them from a safe distance.
I can see that.
Yeah. Now, we all got to know each other because of dark fiction, subversive, transgressive, splatterpunk, bizarro. So we all enjoy the darker end of horror. Horror is dark, and we are all hanging out in like the darkest corner together, like a bunch of
But that's where they
weirdos.
got the cookies.
Yeah.
Come to the dark side. We have cookies.
Yes. I know. Isn't that funny? Because the people in the darkest corner are like the coolest, nicest people in the
Strangers have
whole
the best
community.
candy.
I know, right? So one of the things that I always think about is how these books, especially like splatterpunk and bizarro, the violence is so out there. It's so wild. It's so bazonkers. It's like cocksucker. I mean, Lucas, we can read that book. Are we going to feel scared in the common sense of the word scared? No, because there's that level of, we're going to feel that excitement and that adrenaline and that anticipation and that disturbed and that like grossed out feeling. But there's a level of surrealism to it that creates a psychological safety net. And I don't know if you guys would agree with me on this, but I feel like the more violent, the more gruesome, the more out there and bizarre these things are, the safer they feel. Because in our hearts and minds, we know that I'm never going to be attacked by curious old Bob. Like,
you don't live in Florida.
I might get swamped on the head by a
Mhm.
frozen iguana, but I'm not going to get attacked by curious old Bob.
Sure, what's up?
I owe you an apology. So I read Cocksucker before I didn't read it. But I purchased it before I was ready for it.
Mm-hmm.
Before I'd read any extreme horror.
Oh my God.
I'd read the entire Richard Lehman library.
Okay.
But that was
Little different.
the most extreme thing that I knew existed. I thought that the rooster was interesting, and I thought that the book's description was interesting. And
That first sentence.
And
That first sentence.
I read the first 2 paragraphs, and my Amazon review isn't very kind.
Oh, it's okay.
And I asked for my money back.
You're all right. I take no offense. I mean,
But I really did like Skin Deep.
well, thank you. No, so I have my own subset of weird, gross fiction. I call it my Florida man horror. Like anybody who's
So
read
good.
Welcome to the Splatter Club yet has volume 2 knows Meth Gator.
Meth Gator!
And the whole point to when I write something that gross and extreme, there's always a happy ending. And I do that intentionally. I mean, Cocksucker, despite being as gross as it is, there is a happy ending. I mean, my favorite line isn't any of the gross stuff. And I don't want to spoil it too much, but it's Winston's last line before he saves Freddy. And anybody who remembers the scene, that is my favorite line because it is the total antithesis of what I'm trying to get at. Yes, it is gross, it is weird, it is disgusting, but welcome to Florida.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's one of my favorite books, and it's one of my all-time favorite reviews that I've done since starting TikTok.
One of my favorite reviews you've done. I'm biased, but
Gerhard and I were kind of like, I loved it. I loved it. But that was the first time in a review where I was like, you can read this book if you want, but don't blame me. Do not put that on me. I will take no responsibility for you reading this.
But no, and I mean, and it's intentional. All of it, it's
So
way over the
good.
top. And
so
I want
good.
certain aspects of my splatterpunk to show that.
But
That when it is
but if
that level.
if the person who wrote that review read what I'm writing now, read like he wouldn't have made it through. I don't know that he would have made it through.
No, but that's kind of it. It's, it's not for everybody. And that's the thing when you write extreme horror is you can appreciate that not everybody's ready yet. Like, had I read Jack Ketchum's The Girl Next Door in high school or younger, I would have gotten out of horror because that is an intense book.
Oh my God, yeah.
Very much so. Oh my
I mean,
gosh.
everybody finds their fiction at the right time. And it's the same thing with people who appreciate stuff like Lovecraft. I mean, we appreciate that it is so transgressive from the time that it came out, but we also appreciate that he was a racist prick, even for the time.
Yeah.
But you have to hit it at just the right time in your life, because if you read that now as an adult, realizing that it was steeped in racism, you're not going to enjoy it as much. You have to go in with those innocent eyes. And if you've experienced some of the stuff that we've all experienced, sometimes you can't get into these things unless you've kind of found a good safe space in yourself. Not to say that you need a safe space around you, but you need to be ready in your own person before you can get into any of this. So I don't get turned off by 1-star reviews. I don't get turned off when people tell me it's not for them, because let's face it, your mom's menstrual blood on your foreskin while your sister's sucking your dick isn't for everybody.
I don't know. I mean, I think that's something that universally can be enjoyed by any.
I mean, unless you're going to make a vampire tea.
Well, I grew to love Matt Shaw's Sick, Sicker, and Sickest.
Oh my
So-
God.
Those
yeah.
are fun. Well, it was like everybody asked me about Ed Lee, and I'm like, well, I intentionally avoided Ed Lee while writing Cocksucker because I didn't want that to go into the book. So Ed Lee
Yeah.
didn't ever come into my existence until afterwards. Because
So
it's very pervasive.
Oh my God. Yeah. Well, the
bit.
Drithyphilus, yeah. The phlegm eater.
The family, that one.
Yeah.
and the
Oh
pig,
my God.
The pig.
Yeah.
The pig.
Oh my God. The pig.
Even the pig was appalled.
Yeah. Why do you think we all ended up in this dark corner? I think that it's interesting that people like us who will straight up be very honest and be like, look, life has not been easy. I have post-traumatic stress disorder. I think people automatically assume that there is a mental weakness there as far as how much we can handle. Not intelligence or anything like that, but how sensitive we might be to things that are extreme in nature. What really I have found is that most of our little dark corner is full of people who will straight up be like, yeah, I've seen some shit and I've lived through some hell. And to me, these books are like,
it's for me, it's always been about communication. Like, it's one thing to tell someone that you were physically abused as a child. It's one thing to say that your father was an alcoholic, that you grew up homeless, that, you know, I mean, in my case, I'm the first person in my family to firstly graduate high school. Like, my mom didn't graduate high school. She was in the fields picking fruits and vegetables. My biological father didn't finish middle school because he was already an alcoholic. I mean, so when you come from something, it's hard to talk about it as conversational. You know, these aren't things that you just talk to on a first date. These are things that, you know, you have to stew and hold into yourself for a very long time, at least for me. And I couldn't communicate this stuff until I discovered writing. And then once I discovered writing, that was when I realized I can share these experiences in a safer way than just telling you, oh yeah, by the way, my dad used to beat the shit out of me when I was 5 years old. Yeah, how was your day? You know, it's easier to convey that.
In my stories, the more gruesome they are and the more gore they are, that's me working through something that had happened. And I've never been able to say, okay, this is what happened. I've always had to hide it in a story, and then I feel better. I feel safer, you know? So the more extreme my scenes get, that means, you know, I'm working through something. And the only way I can get past it and put that demon to rest is put it in a story, torture the shit out of somebody.
I actually have a question for the group, because this is the first time I've been presented with an audience of other people who have gone through similar things. Do you guys read your own work? And do you guys actually let your family read it?
I do not let my family read mine. My mom is allowed to read my young adult comedies, but nobody else in my family is allowed to read any of my extreme horror. And I read as I write.
Do you keep it from them because you're afraid of what their perception will be of it?
It's a little bit like they probably don't realize, you know, they probably didn't realize that in that time of my life was dark, and I don't want them to, I don't want it messing with their head. You know, I don't want that on their conscience.
Or them projecting some level of guilt onto themselves, thinking that they are misinterpreting it somehow to put
and
on
I
themselves.
I write darker stuff, and it's just like Lucas has said, it's not for everybody. And I don't want somebody who's in a fragile mindset maybe to come across it and be like, oh my God, such triggers. Because I write darker shit.
I know a lot of people get turned off when I will use like content warnings or trigger warnings with my reviews, because the concept is, well, horror is meant to be horrifying. If you're going to read a horror book, you should expect that it's not going to be comfortable and it's going to be gross and it's going to be awful. But I think sometimes, especially in the subversive, transgressive horror, there's stuff that pops up that you never expected. Like, it'll come out of nowhere and you're like, holy shit. And so I think it's important because everybody has certain levels of tolerance. So you're right on the money. Absolutely. You might have somebody in your life who's just not ready to see that. What about you, other guy?
I did something terrible.
Don't tease, tell us.
I had this book in 2012 called Emily and the Others, and it was a paperback of shorts. And there were stories in there that were like most of my stuff that's blended. And some of them were a little more close to home than some of the stuff that I put out now. And like if you were just reading it, you wouldn't know. And so I don't speak to my dad, but we made a point to drive out like 2.5 hours or whatever to where he's living and give him a copy of the book.
Did you ever hear from him again?
I don't remember if we spoke since then. Yeah, I think we have, but it never came up.
I recently discovered Matthew Cash, who I don't know if you guys have read any of his stuff, but he writes from very, very personal places. And all of his work has had a deep impact on me. But one that he recently did, the Glut, holy crap. I've never resonated with a book so deeply before from the perspective of addiction, and especially from the perspective of the main character who's an emotional eater and develops a food addiction, because I have lived that life and I have been in that space. And here I was reading this completely bizarro novel, and I was feeling so many deep emotions and having to do so much internal processing that I never expected to have to do. Like, this book had me in tears at one point because I related to it so deeply. And yet it was this crazy book about this giant cosmic entity that just like eats everything. It was absolutely, I just, have you guys found books like that just like resonated so deeply with you? Because I've had more emotional experiences with extreme horror or splatterpunk and bizarro than I have with any mainstream horror books, and I find that fascinating.
Not with a book, but with a few movies.
Ooh.
I can't watch Butterfly Effect. It's not even really horror, but I can't watch it because I've lived through something similar to that, or that experience with all the things missing. And it's one of those movies that I watch it and it has an effect on me.
Yeah.
So not in fiction, which is why I've always felt safe with fiction. I mean, words are in your head, but that particular movie, no. That one and what was the Jim Carrey one? Spotless Mind. That one, yeah.
Sunshine of
Sunshine of a Spotless
Eternal
Mind.
Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Yeah.
That to me is the worst possible situation, because I wonder what would be different if I could remember what happened.
Yeah.
And sometimes I don't want to. And that movie reminds me that there are people who will do that intentionally, and it bothers me. I know not everybody understands it until you live it, but Guillermo del Toro said it best. There are two kinds of scary movies: tag and hide and seek. Everybody knows tag. Halloween, Freddy, Jason, the jump out and scare you.
Uh-huh.
Hide and seek would be like Alien. You don't see the monster, but you know it's there. You can hear it, you can feel it. And when it comes to triggers, it's more cerebral than that. When it comes to triggers, it'll be a smell and then you're there.
Oh
Or
my
it'll
God,
be
yes.
it'll be a sound, and then all of a sudden you remember something. And if only I could remember what it was, I could see the zipper in the back and pull it down. But you can't, because you don't have any basis to go off of.
Yeah.
I mean, it gets quite intense, and I can't do those movies.
What about you other guys? Has anybody else had experiences like this with either books or movies where all of a sudden you were like, whoa, why am I feeling so many feelings?
And for me, probably not horror this time, but one of the books that stuck with me the first time I read it, and it was very unexpected because of the style of writing, but Paulo Coelho, I'm probably pronouncing his name wrong, but he wrote a short novella called Veronica Decides to Die. And again, it's about someone who goes to take their own life doesn't. And in case you ever read it, I'm not going to say any more than that, but it's more about the journey when she's met with her own mortality,
wow.
and the emotional journey through not succeeding at ending her own life. And something that comes after that, she finds a strange kind of freedom and a way to live that she hadn't had before. It was just a really, really interesting turn of events in that book. I quite enjoyed that. Another one actually from what this is actually a horror writer within the indie horror community, Carver Pike. He did a book, again, it was really unexpected when I picked it up, Discovering Ivory in a Charcoal Cave, which is a book of poetry, and it's a poetic journey through depression, and the main character he uses is going through a grief journey following the loss of his wife, I think.
Oh my God.
It was so unexpected. And as I read it, I actually bought that book on Kindle, read it like in one sitting, and thought I have to buy like 6 copies minimum so that I've got one to give to everyone.
You
that
said
comes
this
to my
is
house.
Discovery of Charcoal in a
It's by Carver
Discovering
Pike.
Ivory in a Charcoal Cave. Yep, Carver
Discovering-
Pike.
I've read so much of Carver Pike and I didn't even know that this existed.
Yeah,
Discovering
it's totally
Ivory.
outside the realm of his other stuff. It's really hard hitting, and he's poetic. The poetry is just fantastic. It's just so well done.
You're killing me here. My TBR is just getting longer and longer. Thanks, Natasha.
That's why you do these. I need more book recs.
It's true. I need to be more book stressed. Well, you know, guys, mental health has always carried a significant societal stigma. And historically, we commonly see horror tropes like the haunted asylum, the lunatic psychiatrist doing experiments on the patients, or the escaped mental patient, quote unquote, going on a killing spree. Michael Myers. How do you feel the representation of mental illness in horror has been evolving over the past decade? And do you think that have you observed that we in the community seem to be actively trying to change public perceptions regarding mental illness through horror?
I mean, I personally write asylum stories and mad scientist stories, and
Well, they're fun and they're classic.
but I do think that some authors are out there trying to change the image. Me, not so much. I tend to write my villains as people or monsters. So yeah, I'm not really helping the image much, but it's fun to write.
But here's the thing, people are the monsters. So it's not like you're that far off target, because it's absolutely true. That's where I think our fear comes from, is the knowledge that other people are the thing that we should fear the most. And that's just the truth. It's our reality. That's the way it is. And those things are fun. Like, I love one of the things I'm most fascinated by is Waverly Hills Sanatorium in Kentucky. Like, I want to go there so bad because it's a big old abandoned haunted asylum. To me, that like sets my brain on fire. I love that stuff.
Me too. I love stuff like that. Like, I've always wanted to go to like haunted like asylums and spend the night.
Yeah, we'll meet somewhere. We gonna do it together. And I love that stuff. But I feel like when people think of, still in 2022, I feel like when they think of mental illness, they still think of like the crazy psycho killer. You know what I mean? And it's so much more than that. But I feel like horror has had a hard time pulling away from it because it's almost easy, right?
Do you mean that when people think about it, in reality or strictly in fiction?
In fiction.
Okay.
Well, kind of a blend of both. I think there's a lot of stigma. Well, a lot of people think that people who suffer from psychotic disorders are naturally violent. That's not true.
I can't remember the stand-up comedian's name off the top of my head. He was a co-writer on the Dave Chappelle Show, and he has a stand-up special on Netflix called Three Mics. He suffers from depression, and I'm gonna kick myself until I remember the name. But he makes a note of it that he's like, people don't believe me until I show them the receipts of how much time I've spent going to therapy, of how much time I've spent getting medicated, of the types of medication I'm on, with the types of side effects. Why would I take drugs that give me that make you impotent intentionally if you're that sad? It's people look at depression, and because there's no obvious wound, or there's no wound that isn't necessarily self-inflicted, people don't always believe it. And at least, I mean,
I agree with that completely. Look what happened to Robin Williams. He
Oh my
portrayed
God,
himself
yeah.
as the happiest man alive, but he had deep-rooted depression. I was in a bad car accident in 2011, and when they were putting me on the gurney to take me to the hospital, they dropped me on the street. And I ended up having permanent nerve damage, and it also kicked in the fibromyalgia. So just because I'm smiling, people are all like, oh, well, you must be fine.
Because it's an invisible disease. They
Yeah,
say,
it doesn't exist.
right? I have rheumatoid arthritis, and people can't really see how much pain I have all the time. My sister has interstitial cystitis. She's in agony, but because they can't see it and because you can mask it, people don't believe you. And a lot of it's the same with mental health.
so my mother had was complaining about headaches, and these went on for months and months and months and months. She went to several doctors, neurologists, endocrinologists, and they all said it was because she was a bored housewife. It wasn't until she went to her optometrist, because her glasses weren't working, that they found a tumor pressing against her optic nerve the size of a strawberry. People don't understand pain they can't physically see.
No.
And I understand from their perspective, because if someone says, ow, my arm feels like it's falling off, well, it's still there. So where's the
You're
proof?
fine. Go back to work.
And it's like, if they hadn't done the dilation exam, they wouldn't have noticed a strawberry-sized tumor right behind her sinus.
Yep.
And shit like that happens to people all the time when it comes to pain symptoms, when it comes to, feelings of depression. And some of it is societal norms, because yes, there are plenty of people out there who are just shouting for attention. I've had so many friends in high school who were shaking bottles of pills on the cell phone. I'm going to do it this time. I'm going to do it. And they need that person to talk to lean on. And not everybody is available for that. And I understand and I sympathize with people who are naysayers. But at the same time, you have to look. If you don't physically look and empathize with the person, maybe all they needed was that little bit of help. But you don't know until after it's said and done. There's nothing you can do.
Here's an interesting number for you guys. Do you know how long it takes for someone to actually get decent mental health care after their first symptoms start to appear? Any thoughts?
The rest of their life.
It can feel that way, even until they get proper, like their first step towards treatment and diagnosis.
In the US?
It's cultural.
Yeah, in the US, yeah.
Well, it's cultural.
11 years. That's
devastating.
Now, luckily,
Mexican,
a lot of kids. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, growing up Mexican, that was, here's some beer. Here's some tequila. Drink it off. And no.
Which only leads to more problems.
But if it's how you've dealt with it.
I don't have 11 years to waste.
Yeah, exactly.
Bill's got, you have rent due. You have all this other stuff due. You have to pay for your truck. You have to pay. it's life keeps moving regardless of your own problems. And when you live in impoverished situations, that's all you have is tomorrow. You don't have today because it's gone.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, I think our generation has been trying to change this for our children and the children that are coming after us, because I think we're seeing more and more young people who are getting services at an earlier age, if and when possible, because our child adolescent services are overflowing. We have too many children and not enough services to provide them, which in and of itself is a little bit disheartening. But at the same time, I'm happy to see young children getting the help they need that early, because I think our generation, Generation X, the elder millennials, we didn't have that same level of support when we were growing up. If you did, that's awesome. But I have a feeling we probably all had that same experience, or you didn't even talk about the fact that you were sad. I didn't talk about the fact that when I was 11, I wanted to jump out a window because I was afraid I was going to get in trouble.
Kids in Cambodia are starving. Kids in
Right?
Cambodia are starving.
Right?
What's wrong with you?
And the little fat girl wants to jump out a window. Like, that's how I felt. Like I was going to get in trouble for it, because there was so much stigma behind it.
I still have problems admitting that I've got depression. Like I still don't talk about it. I continue to pour my soul into my writing because that's how I deal with it. Even though I'm on the medication, and yeah, I still don't talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you're afraid of what people will think.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely.
I mean, how many of us dudes were hit from our parents because we were crying?
Yeah.
You know, from family members because, oh, you're a dude. Dudes don't show emotions. Dudes don't cry. And how many times were you hit because of it?
I'd like to think that we are changing those patterns for our kids.
Yes.
I sure
I
hope.
always say that I learned to be a good father by not doing everything that my dad did.
Absolutely. I mean, it's tough.
It is. So as an adult and being in basically working and socializing in this genre, what books or films do you feel have had the greatest impact on you from the perspective of how it correlated to your personal mental health experience? I already pointed out The Glut. My experience with that book was pretty heavy, regardless of how fantastical it was. It hit me really hard. What books or movies have you guys had that kind of experience with?
You know, when I see characters on TV that are portrayed with bipolar and they're exhibiting symptoms, then that's always hard for me. Are you familiar with Shameless?
Yeah, the TV show.
Yeah, so the mom and son are both, well, the mom and one of the sons both have type 1 bipolar, which is the same as mine. And like I can really relate to their behavior. And it's just like when I see how they act when they're having episodes, it's like really like that. So when I see that, or if I see like celebrities or stuff like that, I see who are spiraling, and like I either know for sure, or I'm like, I just got the sense that they do by their behavior, and they're being like torn apart by the media. My wife gets annoyed because I always go, I think that person has bipolar, and she's like, oh, stop it. And then I'll like Google it, and it'll be like, yeah, they do. So when I see someone spiraling and then it's like Jim Carrey is out of control and they're making it out like he's intentionally being a jackass, right? But he's having an episode and it's a mental health crisis and they're making a deal of it.
Kanye West. Kanye West openly has bipolar disorder and does not maintain compliance with his treatment and frequently has very public, for lack of a better term, public meltdowns. He's going through one right now. So, and it breaks my heart every time I see it because musically, I think he's a genius, but he's drowning underneath his illness because he doesn't do what he needs to do. What do you other guys?
Just my creatively, I just like whip stuff out when I'm hypermanic, and it's just like if I have to be like at least a little bit manic to write well.
Interesting.
And but it's scary because if I'm too manic, then I could end up in the hospital.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think for me, Clive Barker showed me that it's okay to be weird. I mean, it was between Abarat and The Hellbound Heart.
Oh,
Abarat was such a fantastical story.
yes.
I mean, and the hard part is I didn't even get to read some of it as a kid because of the dyslexia. So it took me a really long time to get through some of that stuff. Like I didn't read Alice in Wonderland until 3 years ago. I mean, trying to read that as a kid was a nightmare.
Oh, yeah.
But I mean, now as an adult, I'm looking at all this stuff and I'm reading stuff now because the writing has actually helped me get through my dyslexia. Because you're seeing the words and you're building the words. And now when you're reading it, you can see how the words are created. And for me, at least, that's how I was able to deal with a lot of it. But Clive Barker, anything he has written, hands down, has showed me that it's okay to be different. I mean, I can't identify as a homosexual male, just being straight, but I identify with feeling alienated. I identified with feeling, not normal to what everybody else is normal.
Yeah.
And to me, that's when I gravitated towards the extremer horror, because I'm like, well, here's a group of all these other writers and people that are suffering similar emotions, but different circumstances. And that's where, at least for my writing style, I've always been pushing perspective, because I want you to get the perspective of the asshole to understand why they're an asshole. I want you to get the perspective of the normal people to understand they don't know how to deal with that, because that is reality. They don't know how to deal with us weirdos.
I think our strength as survivors of trauma actually has made us strong to the point where we need more extreme forms of horror to actually generate those feelings of fear, adrenaline, excitement. What do you guys think?
I do hardcore baking shows.
I would love to watch a hardcore baking show, actually.
Halloween Wars is my jam. So if anybody else.
I actually really love the Great British Baking Show.
And see, I like Hell's Kitchen. That's my type of, horror.
Worst
cooks in America. Give that a go.
Yes.
Put me in a kitchen with Gordon Ramsay and I will cry.
I'm pretty sure I would make Gordon Ramsay cry. Kind of mean.
I would love to see that. I would love to see that head to head. Well, what are you guys reading right now?
I'm reading
Nothing.
I'm reading Earworm.
Oh, Donna Latham just talked about that one. She said it
Yeah.
was amazing.
That was recommend from a review.
What else you guys? Oh, what's that?
Death in Toledo by Frank Edler. I'm doing the
Oh.
audiobook of this one right now. It's hysterical. I highly recommend Death Gets a Book. It's hysterical. That's my
Frank
current
Edler's
read.
Amazing.
So underrated. I think people just need to appreciate he's writing cartoons in fiction.
Yes.
That's what it is. He's writing amazing Ren and Stimpy style cartoons in fiction, and it's delightful.
So good.
I'm reading lots of kids' books at the moment, not because I write kids' books, because I home educate 2 young kids. So we are currently going through Roald Dahl's titles, currently almost finished Matilda, and in book number 6 of the Chronicles of Narnia. On my it's fabulous. It's a total journey through memory lane, and the kids are loving it. On my personal reading list, I have just started reading the Mammoth Book of Folk Horror, edited by Stephen Jones, and I've got too many, like yourself. I've got too many on my TBR.
An overwhelming amount of books that I
Yeah.
desperately want to read.
And you open up that Kindle and they're all just sitting there going, pick me, pick me, pick me.
You know, the Chronicles of Narnia is one of my best childhood memories, actually, because my dad would read a chapter to us every single night before we went to bed. And we went through all the books. And that was the only series he ever did that with, but we went through all of them, and I just love them. I love them.
They are magical. I
I'm
love
so
them.
glad your kids are going to have that same memory, because it's just, makes me all warm inside. RE, Alicia, anything on your lists right now that you are reading?
I am actually in between books at the moment. I just finished one about a week ago, and I've got so many different personal projects going on now that I had to like step back from reading, so I don't really have anything. I wasn't joking.
That's okay. I'm at a point where I'm going like days and days up to a week without reading, simply because I just don't have the time to fit it in. I cram books in on the weekends if I can.
I've got like 2 books coming out on St. Patrick's Day, and I'm working on my Dark Beauty and the Beast, so I'm just like
Yeah. Ari, what about you? Are you reading anything right now?
Right now, I'm reading All Smiles Until I Return.
Aaron Beauregard.
Yes.
How is it?
All right. I'm only about 3 chapters in. I just started it yesterday.
It's in the
But, yeah.
pile.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one.
Oh, awesome. Well, friends, thank you so much for hanging out with me tonight. I really appreciate it. If people would like to contact you, and even more so, if people would like to buy your books, where can they find you? Let's just go around the room. Who wants to go first?
they can find me at Amazon if they want paperbacks, and Godless if they want ebooks. I'm slowly trying to get all my Amazon ebooks over to Godless. And if they want to talk to me, they just hit me up on Facebook Messenger. I almost always check it. So
Natasha, what about you?
Well, my site, all my links are on my site, clanwitch.com. Again, I'm on Facebook and Instagram too. Books can be Amazon. I think I've only got one title on Godless at the moment, so I need to get them moved over a bit too. Because I've got a new release coming out on the 8th of May, which is really funny that you're talking about mental asylums and stuff, because it's called Asylum Daughter. And it's all kind of centered around a mental asylum that I grew up next to.
You grew up next to a mental asylum. I'm so
I did. And I will tell you, the noise from the asylum alarms going off in the morning at 8 a.m. haunt my dreams still. So this is a book I had to write.
Oh my God, I can't wait.
Send me a reminder so that way I can make sure I get it, because I love Asylum books. My books, Rumple Chronicles, is actually part of Asylum as well in there.
Oh.
So
Exciting. I'll happily send you a copy. I'll send you one.
that'd be great.
You too.
Yes. Ari, what about you? Where can they find your stuff?
I have the one collection on Godless, and that's it so far. But I'm on Facebook. I'm
The
probably
rest
other
you'll have to
places.
get a lobotomy for, right?
Lucas.
So I'm in all the social medias, Facebook, Instagram,
Social
Twitter. My books are on Amazon for the paperbacks. If you want to buy paperbacks of Cocksucker, I highly recommend get them from Grindhouse Press. The only other book I'm really shelling right now is going to be Lost Words in a Dream. Now, to most people's surprise, I actually wrote that at the same exact time I wrote Cocksucker. So if you want to see my range of how weird my brain is, go back and forth between those two books. If one was too extreme, Lost Words in a Dream is probably for you.
Beautiful.
But you can definitely get those on Amazon and Godless. I will recommend the paperback. Paperback of Lost Words in a Dream comes with original artwork.
And it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Thank
I
you.
have my copy right next to me right now. Gerhard,
What?
where can people get your books?
You're a freak.
Yes.
On Godless,
Yes.
also on Amazon, but for more money. So no point.
Go Godless.
Unless you just want to give me more money.
Then
Which
by
is
all
fine.
means,
Yeah.
go ahead and do it. But
Yeah.
Bezos gets a cut of that too. So, meh.
Yeah. So you could just go to Godless and buy like 50 copies of one.
That
Oh,
would
me too, me too.
yes, do that for all of these people. Buy 50 copies of all of them.
I mean, most of these are 50 cents, so it's like losing a ramen dinner. You're good.
Right?
Mine's free.
There you go.
So now y'all have no excuse. Go download it. So for more information on these incredible people, please refer to today's show notes or come join us on the Mothers of Mayhem official Facebook group. I think everyone who is in this room right now is a member of that group. So that is a fantastic place to reach out to any and all of us.
I
All
want
of
to hear
us
you
are
shriek.
Huh?
I want to hear you shriek.
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mothers of Mayhem.
That's actually my daughter. That's my 9-year-old. That's my Catherine. You can, very important. If you or someone you love has been struggling with mental health issues or thoughts of suicide, please see today's show notes for links to various mental health resources across the world. I will have everything, as much as I can find and as much as I can fit in the notes, I will have posted for you there. When we do get to airtime of this episode, I will try to also post information and resources on the FB group as well. And you can find links to our various social media accounts in the show bio and by visiting Linktree on any of my TF Did I Just Read accounts. As always, you can send your questions, comments, or insults to our email address, momextremepodcast@gmail.com. It's mom.o.m.extremepodcast. Do not forget to send dildos to Christina. DM me if you need her mailing address. I will hook you the fuck up. And this is something very dear to both R.E. Shambrook and my heart, I believe. I will never stop thanking singer-songwriter Amigo the Devil for number one, being an absolute fucking genius who rocks my world and sets my heart on fire, but also for allowing us to use his song, Hungover in Jonestown, as our theme song, and for his amazing support of the podcast. I still can't believe it. Please go check out his music. You will not regret it. Thank you.
That song is delightful.
Oh my God. Pretty much everything that Amigo the Devil writes is delightful. Small Stone is makes me cry every freaking time. He's just incredible. So thank you again, guys. You have been amazing. We are going to wrap it up here. So until next time, go raise some hell, children, and make your weird book mommies proud. Bye, everybody.
Adios.
Bye.
Life is a joke, and death is the punchline. Oh, la, 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 la.